You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael, and with me always are my co-hosts,
Jay from the hills of Texas,
and Mike from Alaska.
Welcome to the podcast, guys. How's it going?
Pretty good.
Yeah, good for me too.
Is it finally cooling off there in Texas?
It is. We're having a cold front. I was actually able to put on long pants.
A cold front. Long pants. Nice. And is it snowing
it's cooling
up
off
there,
here
Mike?
too, yeah.
Yeah? You got your first snow yet or not?
Not yet.
You got terminus stuff in the mountains, though, right?
We do, and there's no more leaves on the trees. Those are all gone.
Oh, fall happened in a day, literally.
Yeah.
They all migrate down to my place. That's for sure. We got leaves everywhere down.
Well, AK Mike, you got to listen, man. So since it's nice and cool here, I had to go out and mow the lawn. Believe it or not.
That's good. That's good.
I spent the past 2 or 3 days mowing the lawn.
What's a lawn?
Too funny.
You mean those rocks in the front of the house?
Well, rocks with a little bit of that thin, scraggly grass on it. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. That's called a natural exerscape.
Yeah, exactly.
Just rocks
exactly.
Front, so I don't have to mow the. I don't have to mow the.
You just shovel it.
That's good.
just shovel the lawn. Got to shovel the lawn over one side or the other.
That's right. Just moving around with a rake. Well, tonight we are talking a little bit about
safety.
Well, this episode, safety. I think this episode has a funny name. It's called "Burning Down the House," and mainly because I had a little incident. Once again, I'm sure Mr. Neely will.
Oh, come on! I'd say this is just one of those age-related incidences, and it's a good thing that you don't smoke. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes, that's true. So I, obviously you guys know I travel for a living, and I had my Yak 55. I was finishing it up, and I got a new ESC for it. And as a result, I needed to change out, or actually not really change, but install the battery plug, to accept the battery on the end of the ESC. So I sat down at my soldering station, which is in my desk in my little hobby room, and turned it on and was messing around with stuff, and I wound up soldering this end onto the ESC. I was all excited, so I took the airplane out, got it all tested out. I was outside doing a big test, and of course the wife comes in and distracts me, and next thing I know, I'm off doing something else, which, by the way, I worked the next day.
Chicka bow bow. Doing something else, huh?
Yeah.
She distracted you, huh? I have this pizza.
Oh. Oh, well, not quite like that. But
okay, just checking.
I finally got the old man syndrome, and as a result, I got dressed, went to work, and literally was gone for 4 days. But what did I forget to do?
Don't know.
Well, I forgot to turn my soldering iron off. Yeah. Oh, so my soldering iron sat at about, bajillion degrees. Turned up to the max there for literally 4 days. Now, I will tell you that before, I used to just had a soldering iron that was just a pencil soldering iron, and it used to just sit in a little hanger. It was kind of a little tray thing. Well, that I burned that up. I used that up, many years ago, and I wound up getting a soldering station that actually has a holder. It's a metal holder that the pin goes in, or the soldering iron goes in. And so it's well protected. Nothing touches it. It sits on my desk. But I will tell you, for those of you that have soldered before or have never soldered before, if you leave your soldering iron at its max temperature for any length of time, you pretty much ruin the tip. The tip was so bad, it was starting to droop. It actually had a physical curve you could see. As a matter of fact, I had to use the pliers to get the tip out. So needless to say, I got home 4 days later from my trip and walked into the room and thought, gosh, dang it, why is it so hot in here?
So over those 4 days, your wife didn't like smell anything, or I guess it's because it's a dry heat in Arizona that you just go, it must be the dry heat. I don't know. It can't be anything.
Everything smells like it's burning
exactly.
in Arizona. I live in hell. What do you expect? No, she, unfortunately, it's kind of in the back of the house, and she never really went back there. So it wasn't like, it was burning anything. It just was on. And it doesn't smell when it's on. I mean, solder doesn't really have a smell to it, I guess. But needless to say, I got back home and walked into my hobby room, and I did feel that it was a little warmer than it should be. And as I sat down at my desk, I thought, why is the light on my soldering station still on? So I pulled the soldering pin out, and literally the tip was just almost melting off. It had already turned 15 shades of purple, black, rust color, whatever it was. It burned all the tin. I could not even tin the tip. It was so bad. It just pretty much burned up the tip, and I was not happy. So as a result, I have to order new tips because I ran to the store to get some, and they didn't have any for my particular soldering station. And now here I am online searching for some soldering tips, which is where Jay comes in.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So if I remember, for our little group, I'm kind of an RC broker. So whenever anybody in our little group needs something, they mention it to me, and I have a lot of free times on my hands, and I tend to search around the web. Useful, my wife says I'm not a great use, but I am to these guys because I'm constantly on there finding bargains, this, that, and the other thing. And Mike's like, I can't find some tips. A couple of quick clicks, I send him a couple of places he can buy tips from, and I guess he ordered some tips. But you started making me think because I used to be a safety guy, and this got me thinking. Well, you probably need a new iron, so
something that'll save me from myself.
And, I'm also a big YouTube guy. Excuse me. And one of the things I was kind of YouTubing and looking for stuff at the same time. And I was like, well, maybe there's some better irons out there. And I happened across this little miracle. It kind of surprised me because, you think, is there anything new in our hobby, especially for soldering? No, it's the same from ages ago. It hasn't changed much. You get a soldering iron, some solder. How much more different can it be? I mean, other than they have some that are maybe battery powered or they're butane powered or something to use, if you're going to use it like out the field or something. But there's no real changes. And lo and behold, through my quick little Google searches and looking at YouTube, I happened upon the miracle of miracles. It's called the TS100, and it is a neat iron. So I put out to the guys, I said, hey, this is perfect for the old man who's fallen asleep at his soldering station. It's super.
Thank you very much.
It's super safe.
I didn't fall asleep.
Oh,
by the way.
Okay. Fall asleep, walk away for a few days or a week, whichever, take your pick. But
for a couple of days. 4 days.
But when I saw it, it kind of reminded me of, I think we talked a little bit about this with battery chargers. This iron is so smart. It helps guys like us that are getting old, or even if you're totally dumb or you're, don't pay attention, this iron will keep you out of trouble. It's amazing. And lo and behold, I went ahead and sent the YouTube video out, and I was like, this thing is really cool. It does some neat gee whiz stuff. And I said, hey, this is the best place to buy it from, here, there, or the other thing. And even I got excited about it. And so I went ahead and ordered one, told the guys where to get one. And AK Mike went ahead and he got one as well. And he kind of got the better deal in a sense. He got his first, like, even in Alaska. I was really in no hurry for an iron, so I did the slow boat from China. And AK Mike got his. So why don't we hear a little bit from him about what he thought of this thing when he got it?
Yeah, what'd you think about it?
When I first got it, I was like, damn, this is small. I mean, it is
small. By
I
the
mean,
way. It comes in like
a
postage stamp.
Just the handle itself, I can fit in. From the tip of my pinky to the tip of my thumb, it's smaller than that. And I think that's I'm not that big of a guy, and it's a pretty small thing. Even with the tip, it barely stretches past that. From pinky to thumb again. So it's a really small unit. So that has really good and, of course, bad things with it. So like everything that Jay sends me, after I take a look at it, I usually go digging deeper. And as soon as I started looking at this, I found out that it had a new software you could get. So you could get open source software for it. And I was like, holy crap, that's kind of cool. So I started looking at it. And this guy by the name of Brown, I think he's Ben Brown. Yeah, Ben Brown. He wrote some software for it, and you can put it on your TS100, and it does a lot of cool stuff. One thing I like about it is that software allows you to the screen display is an LED display. I'm sorry, an LCD display, and it displays it upright. But if you turn the pen completely over, it'll swap and display it upright still. So it has sensors in the iron to know what direction the unit is being held. And so the display will...
So it's an ambidextrous model.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't matter if you're left-handed or right-handed, you're still going to be able to read the screen.
Exactly. And then it has features like automatic off. Obviously, that's for something like for Mike to use because of his recent episode. And things like power boost. You press the button, it'll boost the power for as long as you hold the button down. And I think one of the other big features I like about it is I could connect a battery to it. I don't have to use it off a power supply if I don't want to.
Now, so just to be clear, the firmware, which is what Mike was talking about, is installed via USB, right? Because the soldering iron has a USB port.
That's correct.
And so you download the software to a USB stick, or just from your computer directly?
Well, for Macs, Jay, you did it on a Mac. What did you do? What did you have to do?
Right. So to kind of help our listeners out. So this is not just like the guys are saying. It's not your ordinary soldering iron. This is a digital soldering iron. It's all newfangled, has an LCD screen like they were saying. And as for this software we're talking about, if you get it right out of the box, for most people, they may not have to, put on the new firmware. But the neat part about this is it's open source. And really, a lot of RC guys, and as I was looking on YouTube, it seems that a lot of quad guys are using this because they crash a lot. They're tearing off leads, stuff like that, and they have to make repairs in the field. And like AK Mike was saying, one of the great things about this is you can use a power supply, or you could use anything from a 3-cell to a 6-cell battery, hook it up to this thing, and make it work. It's phenomenal. Now, the nice part about this open source software, firmware, is that, what was the guy's name again, AK Mike?
Ben Brown.
Yeah, so Mr. Brown came up with the stuff for some RC guys because we tend to need some hotter temperatures. This thing seems to max out at, I do believe, 400 degrees Celsius or about 800 or 750 Fahrenheit. And he wrote it so that it could go about another 100 degrees hotter or 50 degrees Celsius hotter, and which is perfect for some of the thicker gauge wire that we have to use. But the software, we'll put a link in the description. Basically, it's a YouTube video, and the guy's explaining his software, his firmware, and it's pretty easy. It takes you to a what is it? GitHub? No,
GitHub.
GitHub.
GitHub. GitHub.
Takes you to a GitHub page, and you just follow the directions down, and it's pretty easy. You just go ahead and update the newest firmware onto the system. For me, I didn't have to do anything extra. I just had to load the firmware, and it was as simple as going down, getting the hex file, and just when you plug this iron in, it shows up like a USB stick or something. So it'll come up, it'll have a little name, it'll be empty when you look in the directory. I think there's maybe one set of directions or something that's in there. And all I have to do is take that hex file, you stick it in there, you unplug it, replug it back in, it automatically loads it, and you're good to go. It was pretty much that simple.
Now, I use Linux, so for my case, and not true for every Linux user out there, but I had to use a script that is provided in one of the directories in there. But it's in the directory there, and if you look through the issues in GitHub, you can find that stuff, or we can post the script or something, or link to it or something if we want.
Or link to the post. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, it's real easy.
And so you two guys wound up with this new fangled device, and have either one of you been able to use it yet?
Yeah, I used it.
Yeah, AK Mike was the first.
And how? So he's the guinea pig.
He has out of the three of us, he has the most stick time.
Yes.
I liked it. What I liked about it was it's so precise. It was so unnatural to use it because I've been dealing with a Radio Shack 30-watt crappy iron for so long. I was
you put it on the light stem,
Yeah,
that's right. You plug it in, the lights in the
exactly.
house go down.
And so, in this case, I just I was able to just do exactly what I needed to do, and in minimal time, which is really nice. The tip I got was I think it was the B2 or BC2. It has a flat part to it, but it comes to a point. So you can either use the point of it or you can use the flat part. And so in my case, I was soldering some barrel connectors on the electronic speed controller, and I just put the flat part against the barrel and then melted the solder like I would normally do into the barrel. And man, it was great. It was just right on. It's right on precise. And I did have to play with the power a little bit because I didn't know what I needed heat wise. But once I figured it out, it just made it easy.
So now this iron comes with like 5 different types of tips, right?
No.
I think there's like 5 tips.
It has 5 different possible, or more than maybe 5 different possible tips, but it comes with one.
So you get to choose whatever tip that you want.
It really depends where you buy it. Yeah, it really depends where you buy it. That's how I chose which tip I wanted. I was looking around and I knew I wanted this tip, and so I just looked for somebody that was selling the iron that iron with that tip. That's how I decided which one I wanted.
Okay.
But you can't buy a whole rack of tips if you want. But yeah, mostly it's mostly what's the one that you got, Jay? Not the I-tip, the other one.
No, I got the I-tip, and then I got the same tip that you got, the C2, the BC2,
BC2.
with that 45 degree with the with the flat.
Yeah,
so that's what I got.
Most of them come with a different tip altogether. The I-tip and the BC2 tips I would consider tips that a lot of people want or use, which is why I think the one I bought had the BC2 tip on it, because that was a pretty common tip for people to want to get. But I don't know that for sure. I mean, without any kind of feedback from anybody, I wouldn't know.
Now, for Arizona Mike, he's got a different tip than the two of us. So you got
it should say on there, Mike.
I think I got the 24.
Yeah, it's
maybe?
like the D24.
Yeah, the TS24
Yeah.
or D24. Yeah, D24. Now these tips are a little bit different than the soldering iron tips that I'm used to, because the soldering iron tip that I'm used to screws on, or it's got a cap on it and you unscrew it and it's just a little bitty tip. But this thing looks more like a precise instrument.
It is.
It has a it's really probably it's almost as long as the actual unit itself, not a little longer, and it slides in to a little hole, but it's the entire unit, not just the very tip that I'm used to.
Right.
That doesn't really
no,
make
it doesn't.
a lot
But
of sense, if I
we'll have to
posted
put a picture so the guys can see. But
yeah.
The neat thing about this, as opposed to, like you said, usually what we got with the other irons, it was just like this little stump, stub with the tip,
right?
And it just obviously went against the hot plate, and that thing got hot. That's how it worked. And then I guess they kind of did a rheostat to regulate the temperature. Lord knows what the temperature was. You just, hopefully it was hot enough, or the heat of the sun. This thing, when you turn it on, when you first turn it on, it will tell you the temperature in your room. Whatever the temperature of your room is, that sensor or that tip will tell you. It'll say, hey, it's 87 degrees or it's 76 degrees in your room when you first turn it on. And then the next thing that's really neat about the other thing that's killer about this is, our irons that we used to use used to take what, like 2 minutes to 5 minutes to warm up to where you can start using them well. This thing, depending on if you're using batteries, will take anywhere from like 8 seconds to maybe 15 or 25 seconds to heat up, which is phenomenal. And it's really weird because it has a temperature gauge on there, so you can play with the temperature to melt the solder, at whatever temperature you want. And you just sit there and you're watching the gauge and what it's doing. And this thing will come to what Mike, AK Mike, of like a degree or two. It'll fluctuate between the two, and it's just neat. So it'll come on, go off, and it'll just stay at that temperature, whatever temperature you set. So it's really neat.
Yeah, it is it's amazing little product, actually, because it's all digital. It's not, conventional soldering irons were like what Jay just said. You plug it into the wall. It's a heating element. It heats up. You got to wait 10 or 15 minutes. But this is more like a surgical tool. I mean, it really is truly amazing to see it.
I could probably do surgery on you, Mike.
Yeah, really. Give you a new brand.
Yeah, a little cauterizing. We talked about that with Jay, right? Hey Jay, go slice your finger off with the quadcopter again. There.
Yeah, I've done that once or twice. I'm good.
Now, when you put this thing in, does it have to go in any specific way? Or
what do you mean?
Because like I have the angled tip on mine, so do I slide it in and then turn the tip a certain direction?
Well, just what you would want. Yeah. So yes, you do turn it a certain way, but it's based on how you would use it. So, like, if you want to be looking at the screen all the time while you're using it, then you would want to make sure the tip was pointed in a way that you would use it in your workspace.
Yeah, and with the screen LCD facing up for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because mine is way thicker than, it's not a fine point. Mine, I think, is larger, but I do larger size wires.
Right. And the reason you got the tip that you did is because it seems that particular tip is what the drone guys were using for their broken off leads. And those guys are typically, soldering anywhere from 14 to 10 gauge wire. So,
right.
With the finer, I have an I tip, which is really, really fine. It works for that stuff, but it's ungainly, I guess, because it doesn't have the surface area that you have on yours, where you could heat up more. You get more surface area to heat up, a thicker gauge wire. Mine still works, but I'm sure you're probably going to be able to do it at a lower temperature, because I have to crank mine way up in order to get it to work. Where I'm sure since you have more of the surface area to contact with, you'll be able to crank it down a little bit more and have a little bit more control.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, Jay, I think you probably have to also hold yours at a certain angle when you're doing thick wire or something, right? In order to get it to have surface area enough to be able to solder.
One of the things you got to, when you look at the tips, even though I'd say the first quarter of it gets really, really hot, the tip still, for the part of the actual tip that gets heated on my particular eye tip, it's a very small area that gets hot. I mean, really hot to melt the solder.
A quarter inch.
Right? Yeah, it's tiny. Which seems, like I said, it's for soldering more precise things or smaller wires and things, and that's the reason why I got it. But I have some other tips coming on the way, just because I could see that that wasn't going to work for me for everything. But just like my other iron, I had different tips too that worked better than others.
Well, that's true. I had tips that were. Because I have 5 different tips for that iron, or I did at one time.
If I was working on flight controllers or something like that, I'd probably get the eye tip like you did, Jay. I think generic stuff that I do, the BC2 tip is a good choice because it has that flat surface like I was talking about. But it also comes down at an angle so that you can just put the tip of it in whatever you're touching, and it's kind of a point in that respect.
Yep.
So. it'll serve both those purposes. It won't be as good though to use on a small area like a flight controller board or something. It might be too big for that.
Right. Well, I was just thinking, you were saying you were doing bullet connectors, and I know a lot of bullet connectors will have a hole in the bullet connector, the top of the bullet connector, and usually you put the tip of your soldering iron in that hole to get the solder to flow.
Right.
But in your case, you were able to just put it on right on the brass and heat the whole thing up. So that's pretty remarkable too.
Yeah. What I liked about that, Jay, is when I put it on the brass, it did actually heat the other side of it because I had the temperature such that it was only enough to heat the spot where the iron was touching.
Oh.
So on the upside, I didn't make all this extra heat for the connector. So it didn't melt the wire casing, and it didn't make a ton of smoke when I was doing the solder, et cetera.
If you're making a ton of smoke when you're soldering, you might be doing something wrong, my friend.
Well, I mean, like flux smoke.
Oh, okay.
Flux smoke.
Okay. I was ready to say if the smoke alarm's going off when you're soldering, might want to dial it back a bit.
Well, that was one of the things that I didn't like about the conventional soldering irons is I was always fighting, especially on a battery, because I really hate to have, a 6-cell battery hooked up to this little, articulating arm alligator clip, and then have to sit there and hold my soldering iron onto the wire to get the wire hot enough to start accepting the solder, because the solder will actually melt at a lower temperature, but the wire won't take it. It'll just run right off the wire until the wire's hot enough to start absorbing some of that. And it never failed that I was, I'd put the heat shrink at the very end of the wire, and I'd have to sit there long enough that the heat shrink
where you didn't want
at the bottom of the wire and not where it was supposed to be. And then I'm like trying to move this shrunken heat, shrink down off of the thing. It's not going to work because by the time it gets up to the connection, it's already shrunk. It's too hot. It'll heat it up all the way down, almost into the battery, which is dangerous in itself. So it was, one of those things that, I'd have to kind of just play with try to get the clamp to hold it as tight as possible, which never was really good for the silicone, part of it, because then it would cut into the silicone. That was always fearful of, doing those batteries. So. But you're saying this will take care of that, right?
Yeah, it's going to
you'll be able to turn up the heat on it at a level that will take the wire will start taking the solder. So once you figure it, like what Jay did, which is a really good idea, is when he first started playing with it, he took wires that he normally solders and he started practicing with it. So not on a real battery or whatever, but he might take a wire that was the same size as a battery just to see what heat it would take to get it to the point of melting. And then when he did his battery, the next time it's no big deal. He already knows what temperature it should be, sets the temperature, and bam.
And this is a digital temperature too, right? So we can just set whatever. If that temperature's 450 degrees, then we just type in 450 degrees, and it
That's
turns. Correct.
And
then each solder tube will actually have a temperature that it melts at, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can find that
depending on the non-cheap versions of solder, it'll actually say on the outside of it, but on my version, it doesn't really tell
mystery
you.
Solder.
It was easy enough to figure. Yeah, it was easy enough to figure out.
Yeah, you just hold the iron to it,
right?
It starts dripping all over your desk.
Well, this thing is so cool that I was, like I said, I was just figuring out because I had mystery solder as well, and so I was just bumping the temperature up and bumping it up and bumping it up, and I was able to get the solder soft, and I was able to I was playing with it. I get it soft enough that I could almost shape it and then stretch it out. So it was just kind of cool just to play with it at such a low temperature. Now it's not good for doing anything, but the neat part about that is just that you can slowly, like you said, bump up the temperature, and this boost mode that it has, you let's say it's 450 degrees to get the solder to flow and do your project. Well, when you first start to heat that wire up, it has this boost mode, and it boosts it up like 50 degrees higher than what the temperature for the solder to flow. So if you wanted to heat the wire up real quick, you hit the boost mode, it goes up to like 500 degrees, let go of the boost mode, then it creeps back down to 450, and you start your solder. No, you shouldn't have that much smoke. The wire shouldn't get that hot. It's pretty neat. The other thing that's kind of cool, if you have, instead of the silicone wire, if you have like the plastic type of wire, like servo wire. And I know if any of you guys had servo wire and you're trying to solder it, you clip off just a little wee bit, and then you put the soldering iron, and then it just wicks up the wire, and the plastic all melts, and you're like, yeah, I just want to put a dab of solder on this thing. Well, this thing's pretty neat that you can take the iron, put it on the plastic, figure out where the plastic melts. Let's say it's 425. That the plastic melts. Well, you could set the iron, at 415, and get the solder to flow, and you can go ahead and do your little tack job and not have to worry about melting the plastic on the servo wire. It's pretty cool.
You're talking about the plastic casing that.
Yeah. Instead of having,
right.
Where we're talking battery wires with the silicon, but you know how sometimes you on your actual batteries you'll have the lead connect, not the lead connectors, the cell count connectors that are on there,
balance,
and like one of those will pop off or snap off or something. You go to solder those, and they have plastic wires instead of the silicon ones, and they melt all over the place. It's like on those things. It's really quite cool.
Or in my case, I'll just suck up half a tube of solder in the one thing, and then it sticks straight out. It's not bendable anymore. So you just have this really rock hard piece of about 18 inches of solder because it wicked up in stupid servo wire, and now it's just all
the other thing that was really cool was how well the solder sticks to the tips. Did you notice that, AK Mike?
Yeah
it really likes the solder likes to stick to these tips. I mean, I did tin it, but still, it right out of the box, I was just playing with it, and it just uncannily stuck to it, where my other iron, it was hit or miss whether it was going to stick to the tip or not, or it would just roll off, or the tip would oxidize and just roll off, and it was kind of worthless.
Because I can keep the temperature low, or lower, the tip doesn't get dirty.
Right, it doesn't oxidize.
Fast.
Yeah.
So in other words, yeah. So if you do a job and you solder it up and then you wipe it off on the Brillo pad thing or your sponge or whatever you're using, it stays clean. And so then the next time you go to use it, you're not having to
you don't
clean
have to
it off again before you use it.
It doesn't oxidize, and therefore it contacts better and your solder flows better and quicker. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, just like I said, it's so precise. That's what I really like about it. It's a very precise tool for something that has not been precise in my life for the longest time.
This is true. The soldering was always hit and miss with me. I mean, I can solder, and I've learned to do it, but I turn it way up, and then I touch it a couple of times. And sometimes when I'm doing really heavy gauge wire, it's a lot harder. I've gotten a couple of things lately that already had solder already on the wire, and I basically wound up just cutting it off because I couldn't get the iron hot enough to melt whatever solder globs that they had on the end of this battery or whatever it was, and I wound up just clipping it off. But this thing should be able to
right. Well, so far I think with this mod or this new firmware that Mr. Brown came up with, I want to say it goes up to 850 degrees Fahrenheit, so it shouldn't be a problem.
It's 450 Celsius max.
Yeah. And it comes out to like 850, something like that Fahrenheit.
That's a pretty hot iron. I mean, for being so small.
Yep. And like I said, it's just so amazing. I just like turning it on and like putting in a temperature, and it just like zip, it's there. And it's weird because it doesn't on the old iron. I mean, after a while, I mean, it's like whoa. I mean, you can see the waves coming off, the radiation coming off of it from the heat.
Right.
And this thing, I mean, I'm not going to say it's unsafe because it just looks like it's just sitting there. It's not hot. You pick it up, it's not hot. And
well, it's not.
Well,
like
how your
the
irons would get warm in your hands. I'm not saying they get hot, but they get warm, or they get kind of, the more you use it or you have it on the super, you got it maxed out. After a while, they tend to get a little warmish in your hands. This thing never. You can barely even tell it's on, even when you have it maxed out. So to me that was kind of weird.
So if you grab the wrong end of it, is it?
Yeah, that would be bad.
That'd
You'll
be a
notice
bad
that.
thing?
It's still going to hurt.
Yeah, that's going to hurt for a bit.
That's still.
You'll hear a sizzle. What's cooking?
That's going
Smells
to
like
leave a
bacon.
mark. So let's talk a little bit about the power supply, because it's different than most soldering irons. Most soldering irons have a cable that's attached to it that you plug into the wall. This is not like that.
It does not come. This is going to throw a bunch of people when you first buy it, because you figure it's going to come with a socket or something that you plug in the wall. It comes with nothing. It just comes with the soldering iron and the tip, and you have to come up with your power supply. So you could go the easiest way. You can go just with your batteries. You could use any of your 3 to 6 cell batteries, and you're going to need a cable plug, which everybody has, or you should be able to find one, or a spare old one or something from an old power supply. It's a 5 by 5 millimeter outer diameter by 2.5 millimeter inner diameter, and that's typically, you'll find those things on old computer, plug or laptop style power supplies, things like that, or even some phone recharging, power supplies. And on those, of course, they're only going to be like 5 volts. So if you wanted to make your own power supply with a Dean's or a XT60 connector, you just cut that off, solder that up, and then you have a power supply. Also, like I was just saying, if you have an old style laptop power supply, they're typically, I want to say 14 to 16 volts, and that's perfect because, like I said, this thing can take up to 24 volts for a power supply. It works well with all those power ranges. It's just how well and how quickly it heats up. And I think you need AK Mike, you have to have at least 2 amps. And that was a problem I just ran into this week. I ordered a little small power supply. Turned out that it wasn't a switching power supply like your laptop power supply. It supposedly had enough amps, but I guess because it was a linear power supply, not a switching one, anytime I plugged it in, I turned on the power and it jumped to move the temperature up. It couldn't get above 200 degrees without resetting the iron because the power supply would fail. So, no problem. I'll send that back and grab another one.
Yeah, so it's a matter of I don't know the electronics of it, but it's a matter of wattage that power supply can put out. Obviously, the more volts you have, the less amps is going to actually be required to make it work. But I think that most people, and Jay said you don't get a power supply with it. Depends where you buy it from. You can actually get a unit that has a power supply included. That's what I did. I decided to buy one that had the power
Amazon,
supply already,
right?
and they provided a 19 volt power supply. So basically, middle of the road between what the 2 ends are that it can accept, and that it works just fine. I think the amps are. I think I said it was 2 something amps. Is that right, Jim?
Right.
So really, it's just a matter about how much watts you're putting out from the power supply that you're using. So you can use a 3 cell. It's the smallest battery you can use, but I don't think you get the performance that you want out of that.
No, I hooked it up to a 12 cell, and if it goes pretty much, like 11.5, it starts getting wonky. So really, I would say you have to have a 4 to a 6 cell to really, maintain a good, having no problems, not getting, below, because once again, if you have it maxed out at that 800 degrees Fahrenheit, I think the 3 cell is going to be struggling, where 4 cell will have no problem.
Well, if you had a 3 cell like 4,000, then you might be able to hit those numbers because it's going to be about 4 amps coming out of that battery.
Yes, I think you're right.
So it's going to be okay. But Jay's right. I mean, it's going to suck that battery down in no time, as well, I imagine. So I think Jay's right. Anywhere from 4 to 6. And then the thing to note, it says there's warnings out there in the world, but if you use a 6 cell battery, that's actually overvolting the. If it's a fully charged battery, you're going to overvolt the iron. So you want to be careful if you're using a 6 volt battery that doesn't have full charge.
Yeah, I read that, but I also read somewhere a couple of things out there that they said, although they say it's only to 24, it can actually go up to 26 volts. So
I'm not gonna. You could test it on yours and let me know if that plays out.
Now, once again, the name of ours is the one that I got. Mike in Arizona is a TS100, but you got a Sand Saint or something. It's basically a clone, but it's called Sand Saint, not a TS100, right?
Yeah, but it's also a TS100. It says that on there as well. Yeah, but the company I bought it from is I don't remember their name at the moment. I can figure that out, but yeah, it's just by a different vendor is putting it together.
Okay, well, either way, if you put in TS100 and you just do a quick Google search, you'll find it either variant. And like Mike said, the hard part about getting one of these is what tip that you want, because the pictures really don't give you the scale of the, how small the tips are and, or how big they are. And, so, you just got to take your best guess as to what you think you might want to use.
Right.
Now, another feature that I really liked about this.
It's a Sane Smart Pro 32.
Okay. Sane Smart 32. Okay. Another feature that I really dig about this iron is, once again, how smart it is. I think AK Mike was getting about it was the that it has accelerometers in it. So it can tell, excuse me, it can tell whether or not you're moving the device. So if you put it down and after a minute, it'll go into a sleep mode. You pick it up, and when you put it into sleep mode, it doesn't keep let's say you have the temperature at, nuclear hot, 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, after a minute, it goes into a sleep mode, and it cools down to like 350 or 300 or 250, or basically you can set whatever temperature you want it to rest at, and therefore it doesn't have to jump up with a lot of power to get it heated up again. So it just keeps it in a warm mode, and then after about 5 or 10 minutes, depending on what you set, it'll actually go to sleep and turn itself off. Now, it's not actually totally dead, but in like Mike's example, he wouldn't have burnt the house down. So if he had hooked to a regular power supply, the power supply would be on. There would be no chance of fire because the unit would turn itself off. If he had it plugged into batteries, well, he might have drained that battery by the time he got back home. But he still has a house.
Yeah. Well, 4 days.
He still had a house, and he might have ruined a $20 battery.
It's okay. I live in a $20
cardboard
house.
box. Yeah,
So.
I don't think your wife wants to live in that. You might, not her though.
That's too funny. So, going back to the how do you do the what do you call that? The firmware upgrade. So you both talked about that, but what does that give you? What does that give you? I mean, you upgraded the firmware.
You don't have to. You don't have to
you
upgrade the firmware. The only reason we're bringing it up is because most RC guys are. If you're soldering, like I said, like flight control boards, and you're just putting headers on, you don't have to change anything. But it's when you're starting to solder, 10, 12, 14 gauge wire on batteries and those type of connectors, then you need a little bit more heat, And what this guy did with this open firmware, it was he was able to go in there and actually boost what came from the company, which was, like you said, 400 degrees Celsius, to be able to go 450 degrees Celsius, which would give you the power to melt whatever you want. And he also included if you I think with the old software it just said like DC power supply and then like battery power supply. Well, he put in there you get to select whether it's a 3-cell, 4-cell, or 6-cell, and he had a warning, where the LCD would flash at you saying, warning, battery low, based upon what battery you're using. So you made it smarter, so if you set it for a 4-cell battery and it gets down to, 15 point whatever volts, it starts flashing at you, letting you know that it's low, the battery's low. As where before, it just said you just used the battery, didn't know what battery you're using. So he added in things like that helped out the RC guy.
This unit, the more I read about it and the more I talk to you guys about it, is fairly amazing.
Yeah.
And then the fact that you can hook it up to a battery means that you can actually take it out to the field.
Absolutely.
So now while I'm out and something happens, I break a wire, my day's not over because I can just use the same battery that the airplane's plugged into, plug my soldering iron in, and then here we go. We just touch the solder. It just means I got to carry solder around in my bag.
Well, you just pull off a bit and throw it in a plastic bag, and that's something you just bury in your flight bag or something. The part that I like about this iron is because it's so small. Like I said, it reminds me of like carrying a hobby knife. That's my thoughts of it. it's so small that, if you put it in like a cigar tube, you could carry it around. It's that's light.
That's true. I will tell you that I'm sitting here with it next to the Sharpie marker. This is a smaller Sharpie marker, and it's almost the same length as the Sharpie marker and the same. If this was one of those bigger, fatter ones, it would be exactly the same. So for reference, it's kind of hard to show, but for reference, you can see a Sharpie or two AAA batteries. Two AA batteries stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, and if you take the tip out, just with a quick Allen wrench, you pull out the tip, and if you stored that next to it, you put it in your pocket, no problem.
Now, does it stay, Mike? Does it stay hot very long after you turn it off? Because I know that my conventional one, once I turn it off, I can't go near it for an hour while it's cooling off.
Well, I don't think it takes an hour, but it's metal, so it's going to take however long the metal takes to cool off. I mean, that's pretty standard, whatever it is. It doesn't have any special cooling properties that I could tell. But like Jay said, I think that the tip that's active and working is what's the part that's getting hot, and the rest of the metal is for probably diffusing the heat and or just keeping the heat consistent, I assume, as well as to hold the sensors that are probably in there. I don't know where the sensors are actually either. They could be in the electronics part. I'm not really clear on that, but it's just like I said, it's metal, so it's going to take some time to cool off. I don't know if it's an hour, but it's going to take some time.
No, I've been playing with mine, and really within 3 to 5 minutes, it's cooled off. In fact, like I said, you could just start playing with it and then unplug it and then plug it back in, and it'll flash the temperature at you saying, hey, warning, it'll say, warning, the tip is warm. It'll start flashing what the temperature of the tip is. And you can just sit there and watch it go down or up. And it doesn't take it very long to get cool from, say, 500 or 600 degrees to where you can touch it like 120, where you could pick it up and not have to worry about burning yourself. It doesn't take that long at all. It's quite remarkable.
One of the things that Jay didn't mention was there's also a standby heat level. So, for example, let's say you're working on a project and you put it into the holder, and then you kind of leave it there for 3 or 4 minutes. I can't remember what the default setting is, but you leave it there for a few minutes. Well, it'll actually power down and remove heat from the tip. So, depending on what you have it set for, if you let it set for 3 minutes and that's what it's set for, it would go from whatever you had it running at to this power down mode, so that it's not burning full hot, which would also help you keep I would assume would help with the length of time that the tip is workable.
Well, yeah, I can tell you after 4 days the tip is not workable.
It becomes art.
It does become art, and it becomes bent, and it won't tend, so you can't heat anything up with it.
With this system, if you want to think about it, let's say you're working on a project and it takes you an hour to solder it up, cut the wires, move the plane, do whatever, get all the things in place, So the neat part about this iron is if you were to do it the old way with an old iron, and it takes you an hour to do everything, well, that means the iron was on for an hour. And let's say you had it at, melt the sun type temperatures in order to make it work. Well, it has to stay on for a full hour, till you got your job done. With this thing, it might be actually on at nuclear temperatures for 5 minutes, 3 minutes. That it actually took you to do the actual work because, you put it down, it goes to its sleep mode, or it goes to its power down mode. Right, you pick it up, it goes up to those hot temperatures. It's only for a few minutes. You put it down, it goes into sleep mode after a minute. Or power down mode for after a minute of rest, and you're actually not putting a lot of stick time on it when you're using it, which is rather cool.
Oh, I didn't think about that. So, what do you set it on? Because it doesn't come with a holder or anything like that. Is there? Mike, what do you use to set this on?
I just use my third hand setup that I have. So it has, it fits in there. It just goes. It goes in the even though it's really small for that setup, it just sits in a way that it doesn't touch it. It's just like it was. It's just the holder. I'm just using the same holder I did before. it kind of falls through a little bit, so the tip actually rests on the cast iron part of the
base.
third hand thing. But that's
right.
that's not going to kill it.
Yeah, for me right now, I'm just using. I have a pair of pliers, needle nose pliers, the ones that have the little bend in it, and I'm able to sit the iron between the handles, and then it kind of rests on the actual metal of the pliers, and the tip stays up, away from the table. And that's what I'm using right now. But they show like a little wire, like this little wire. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a wire, or almost like an ashtray looking thing.
Looks like an upside down U
that it rests in. But honestly, you could almost just lay it down on its side and just leave it on the table, because it doesn't. The tip shouldn't touch the table when you lay it down on its side. It's just that, that doesn't seem very safe. And then of course you can touch it.
Give it a try.
That wouldn't be so much fun either.
Yeah, it's about a 1/8 to a 1/4 inch off the table with it sitting on its side.
So I'm not recommending doing that, but you could
I mean,
get away with doing that. I'm just,
Yeah, and it'll actually sit upright or on its side.
I do want to say one thing. I was talking with one of our listeners, and he was saying, okay, you guys keep talking about escapes. What the hell is an escape? And I was like, oh, well, because I use computers a lot, and the letters ESC means escape to me. So I've always called it an escape. Now, I don't know if that's something that Jay always did too or not, or he just adapted my terminology or not. But, it's really an electronic speed controller, not an escape. Escape is just a terminology I've used. And I think other people use it in it as well, but I know I do regularly.
Yeah, I usually regularly use the ESC as well, or escape, but it is an electronic speed controller, so that's the correct terminology. And I thought when we did our last podcast, we were probably not as clear with that as we should have been, but yeah, that's what ESC usually stands for, electronic speed controller. We just use the term escape. That was good to bring that up there, Mike.
Sure.
Well, our hour's about up, but it's amazing that this technology is coming out. I'm really excited about all the new technology that comes out, because every little new thing that comes on the market helps us out in the long run.
No, absolutely, and I have to say, for me, I'm not a super gadget guy like you are, but I'm actually glad that you almost burned your house down, because this has kind of changed the whole way I look at soldering.
Yeah,
just because of the innovations with this. And it's not like they put like gee whiz miracle stuff into this. They just use some phone technology, some simple logic, but they've totally changed how this iron is, made it super safe, pretty sleek, portable. It's not super expensive. I'd say it's a good investment. It doesn't take up any room, In fact, the biggest problem I've had with it is I keep misplacing it.
One thing that I would have to say I didn't like about it, or don't like about it, is the power supply I got with it. The cord isn't long enough to reach from the floor to the table where I'm using the iron. So I have to pick the brick up. It goes into the wall, and then it goes into a brick, and then it goes to the back of it. And I have to pick that up and put it on the table in order for that to work. Now, the cable's long enough to go from the wall to the table, so I can put the brick on the table and work it. But it just creates a little bit of a hassle factor. And because the thing is so light, the cable that you're using, like that's connected to it, it sort of drags the back end around. It puts pressure on it. And that's not a big deal, because I just, I'll just use my hand to control it. But it was just, those were things that I noticed that were sort of a downside relative to my current iron, which doesn't have that problem. The cord is plenty long for that.
No, that makes perfect sense. Well, what else you have to add for this TS100? It retails for about $59 to $79.
Yeah, depending on which kit you get. It comes with, I want to say, it's anywhere from 5 or 6 different tips, depending on what you want to use it for. You do have to get a power supply for it. So I think Mike got a standalone power supply. AK Mike got a standalone power supply. I kind of jerry-rigged a cable together that I could use with my battery power supply because I can go up to 24 volts on it. Arizona Mike, I think you got a cable with yours so you could hook it up to an XT60 connector so you can use it on batteries and you can use it on your power supply.
That's correct.
So, I mean, it's really versatile
Correct.
depending on how you want to use this thing. It's just that you have to realize that you have to present the power supply. So, you're not going to get anything with it in that respect. But I have to recommend it highly.
It comes in 3 colors, right? It comes in orange, black, and blue.
Actually, this thing is really modular. So it basically comes in one color, like a Model T Ford. It comes in black, but you can get 2 other colors, blue and orange, depending on the kit. And then they also have an accessory pack where they have, I want to say, up to 5 different colors if you want to change the body out. They have a translucent one. They have, I think, a fluorescent orange, a red, and some other colors, brown, and some other colors as well. So, if you want to change your iron up and you want to look totally different than the other guy, you can modify it. Also, for AK Mike,
Very cool.
with this firmware, you can also put your own logo on the boot up. Right when it boots up, it could say, "Hey, Mike's hot iron." Or hot stick or something.
Mike's hot stick.
You could, yeah.
Oh
I wouldn't do that,
gosh.
but you could. Yeah, you could.
Yeah,
you
I
could
don't know if I'd
but I
do
wouldn't
that
do it.
either.
So also we get a bunch of tips.
Yeah, Jay, I wanted
go ahead.
to mention to you. I wanted to mention to you that on mine, it actually came. The power supply came with the unit. So if you buy the Sane Smart Pro 32 one,
Yes.
it actually has the power supply in the unit. So I think I ended up paying $60 or
delivered to
something
Alaska.
like that. Yeah, delivered to Alaska. Yeah.
Everybody, don't walk, run, and go get this iron.
Don't walk, run, and go get the iron. Well, the quad guys have pretty much broken this out because they've been using it for at least a few months. The RC guys have yet to log on to or grab onto this technology, but the 3 of us now have it, so we wanted to present it to you in the Park Flyer podcast. So we'll post a link on where to get some of these items, and it's a great tool to add to your toolbox, I guess, in the soldering world, and helps you not to do like I do and try to burn the house down.
And your wives will love you for not burning down the house. So. Excellent.
Yes, that's true. Well, anything new on the horizon before we go?
Let's see. For me, no, I just have 2 planes. I got a Maiden. I think AK Mike has a plane almost there.
Yeah, almost there. It should be here tomorrow, actually.
And
Excellent.
And you got one, and you just got a
today.
new toy today with a hole in it.
I did. Just a hole.
Oh, it's okay. I couldn't tell if it was tearing the box or UPS man was kicking its ribs in. I couldn't tell which.
No, I opened it and checked, and all
good.
the parts are still in good condition. The hole where the whatever punctured the box did not go into any parts.
Okay. So
Lucky
did you find that one on the lawn ornaments outside the house, or
Yeah, they tossed it over the fence.
Well, you said the iron
it was
one.
on our front
You
porch.
just happened to stumble upon it because they put it like on the wall, or they hit it, or.
That is true. Yeah, the little box that the iron came in was really small, and they just dropped it behind a plant out in my front yard where my pony wall comes in. I have a wall that kind of surrounds the front part of the yard. It's a little porch patio kind of sitting area, and they just dropped it behind a plant there. So had I not been paying attention, I walked right past that thing about 3 times before I finally go, what is that in the bush? And I lifted it up and,
Well, we're just making sure nobody stole it.
Hey, it kind of
Or
hit
he
it down
found
there.
it.
Yeah, I was actually running back and forth. We, I live on some acreage, and my wife had found a snake in the garage and was a little worried about it. So I was busy messing around with this snake and trying to get it relocated out into a better part of the yard. It was a good snake for us. We like to keep those. And as I was walking back past my, entranceway, I have a big archway. I saw it kind of out of the corner of my eye. I saw a white box sitting on the ground behind the plant, and I thought, what the heck? And I walked over there, and sure enough, it was UPS, United States Postal System. You just drop it right there at the gate. And
well, you better go search all around your property then.
It's like Easter. It's an Easter egg hunt for new products. No, the big box that I have is the new airplane. I had to retire an old friend not too long ago. My 3D Hobby Shop Extra SHP finally agreed to no longer continue the effort after 250 flights. And what I say, it was like since 2010, so almost 2008. So
yeah, it's almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years. So almost 10 years I've had it, over 250 flights. And I had some repairs to do to it, and when I started pulling the covering off of it, parts started falling out.
So she pretty much gave up the Ghost a year or so ago, and it was only the covering that was keeping her alive.
That was holding it together. Yeah, which is amazing because I fly that airplane really hard. I mean, I tumble it and knife edge spin it and, touch and goes and hover and tail touches and that kind of thing. So I do fly that airplane with some, gusto, I guess is a good way to say it. And the covering did hold it together. So it was amazing that she lasted that long. But I thought, rather than watch it just crater into the ground, I would be the one to, say goodbye. And so as a result, that we retired it. But I replaced it with the new 3D Hobby Shop Edge 540 demonstrator. Ooh. So it arrived today. And I'll have to break it out of the box this weekend and kind of see if I can get it together.
It sounds like your old plane, its soul will live in this one. So all the guts will come out and go into her. So
I
awesome.
hope so. Yeah, they are, because I can pretty much transfer almost everything over to this one. So I'm pretty excited about it. So, well, Mike, what's the new airplane that you're getting?
It is called a Talon.
What does it do?
Flies.
It's a, yeah, it's the reason why I got it is because it's a portable plane. The wings are supposed to be able to come off it real easy, and the tail's supposed to come off it real easy. So, if I decide to come down to the lower 48 at some point, I could maybe bring that with me as a plane to fly. If I can sneak in some lipos on the airplane, not get them, not have to leave them at home or something.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, well, I mean, is that really a problem, Mike? Lipos on the plane?
Some lipos on the airplane we don't allow, but some of them actually have to be up in the passenger cabin as opposed to underneath.
Okay, good, because I've been traveling with mine all the time. So, whoops.
Yeah, no, I've traveled with some too, but they're no different than what you have in your phone. So you just have to be aware of them.
Okay. Thank goodness I don't want to be jacked up with the TSA,
Yeah, exactly. So, well, fellas, we appreciate you joining us tonight on the Park Flyer Podcast. Mike, it's great to have you as a host. We will have to do some more episodes with you. It's always a pleasure to have your contribution and your.
Well, thanks for having me.
All the time. Yeah, no problem. Jay, we appreciate you joining us as well. I'm glad the weather's getting better down here. I think the holiday seasons are coming up, so Jay and I may get together and do some flying. I can get some time off and get down.
Yeah, we'll have to have a turkey day or chasing the turkeys.
Yeah, that's true. Mike, I think they just announced the Electric Festival, so we'll put that on our calendar and talk about it as it gets a little closer.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea. I think we will.
For Michael here in Arizona.
And from the hill country of Texas.
And Mike in Alaska.
Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.